power or perhaps the lack of political capital. But also don't forget, in addition to the congresswoman, there were quite a few of the state delegation members and folks that cast their support for Constable Ugarte. So to a certain extent, I think those are good for the visuals, but I will tell you that based just on social media traffic and the amount of door-to-door work that the constable did, I think that's where the real payoff is. And so I think we always look for endorsements because I think there is a value on a mailer. In fact, this created some tension, as I think you all reported that there was a line from a letter that the congresswoman wrote to one of the candidates that was made it seem like she was giving an endorsement, which wasn't accurate in the mailer. So I don't necessarily know that endorsements have the kind of impact unless they come with additional money, and in some cases, a lot of times you see this with the unions, if it comes with boots on the ground, people that are going to go knock and do some of that door-to-door work. And I think in this case, what you're seeing with the constable is that his ground game was built up and seems to be working a little bit better, at least at this point in the night.
All right, thank you. And our complete coverage of the primary elections is also on our website, kvia.com. And we have live up-to-the-minute results on the homepage, as you can see, updated automatically, just like they have been on air as soon as those new results come in. So if you want to track how the races are shaping up, just visit our website, or you can continue watching ABC 7 right now or on ABC 7 at 10. We also have articles breaking down the key races, as well as a live blog. And we also have the results right there at the bottom of your screen right now. Those will be running throughout ABC 7 at 10 as well. ABC 7 has been sending breaking news alerts about the primary elections on the KVIA News app. Scan that QR code to download the app. We send notifications anytime we have a major development in any local, state, or national race.
Now to the race for State House District 77, and as expected by many, this race is headed for a runoff in May as well. Let's take a look at the results. Vince Perez appears to be currently leading ahead of the other candidates, with Homer Reza, Norma Chavez, and Alessandra Anello also in the race. Norma Chavez is in second place at 31%, so at this point it looks like the runoff, if it were to be where it's at right now, there's still 78% of the precincts reporting. There's still plenty of time, but at this point, it looks like there might be a runoff between Vince Perez and, of course, Norma Chavez. That is Chavez, rather. This is District 77. Also had an early lead. Vincent Perez is winning momentarily, as mentioned. And, of course, we have Norma Chavez, who looks like she might be the person that goes along with him in that runoff. Now, ABC 7's Heriberto Perez has been shadowing the candidates all night for the District 77 state rep, and he joins us live. Heriberto.
That's right, Paul. Good evening. We're out here at Vince Perez's watch party in South Central El Paso, where you can see behind me people that has gathered here at Dead Beach Brewery in South Central El Paso to support candidate Perez, which I just talked to him a couple of minutes ago. He told me El Paso is a very special place for him, as he envisions to have all local, state, and federal leaders and authorities as well, all unified for El Paso. Just a couple of minutes before we got here, we also went to Norma Chavez's watch party at L&J Cafe, where she also told us what she thinks about a possible runoff election later in the year against candidate Perez. This is what both candidates told me.
I'm just immensely grateful to the people of El Paso. This was really a special election. You know, so many people came together. So many people were just great during this whole process, and I really love this community. And you know, having the results come in the way that they did tonight, best feeling in the world. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who believed in our campaign.
I think what was important in this race is that we needed to remind the people that we have opportunity here with electing a representative that's going to have seniority for El Paso. And that's been the message, and it will continue to be the message, is that I go back with the experience, with the knowledge, and the capacity to impact for El Paso on day one.
Guys, and we are going to stay out here at candidate Perez's watch party as more results are coming over, and as numbers change later tonight, as well as you just mentioned, Paul, we will have a live interview with Vince Perez to ask him what he thinks about a possible runoff election later in the year. That's all coming up tonight on ABC 7 at 10. But for right now, I'm reporting live in South Central El Paso. Heriberto Perez, ABC 7.
Thank you, Heriberto. The winner of that race will replace Lina Ortega, who's not seeking re-election. With no Republican candidate running, the winner of the primary takes office in 2025, and the winner will represent District 77 in the Texas House of Representatives. It covers a section of West El Paso, downtown Central, and the Lower Valley.
So, Dr. Pineda, we want to bring you back in here. So, Norma Chavez has been saying that she is the candidate with experience. She was in office up until 2011, so we're talking about 13 years have passed. How does her experience weigh against someone like Vince Perez, who was coming off a commissioner seat that he was voted out of in 2020?
This is another interesting race in the runoff because you're talking about two sets of experience. You're talking about name recognition for both candidates. And so I think that this is going to be a race that's really going to be decided by how well these campaigns do the block walking and connect with voters. I think that that's important. It's always interesting when there's a gap in time for somebody who's an elected official and then has taken time out of the race. We've seen some races locally where you've seen candidates flip-flop or there's been some movement. This one's a little bit trickier given the amount of time. The other thing that's interesting is that the former rep makes the argument about seniority, but this is actually something that's unclear. If the argument is there's experience because of time in the State House, that's one thing, but seniority comes from a consistent amount of time. That's essentially how the Speaker makes assignments, and the longer that you're in the House, the longer that carries capital to get those assignments. I'm not entirely sure that that's true in this case. I think there's a difference between framing experience versus the seniority. I don't think that carries over. And so that might be an issue. I think that you're going to see former Commissioner Perez make that argument. But I think that this is a race that's going to come down to who knocks on the most doors and who connects with voters.
All right, thank you so much. And we're also following the state race for the House District 74. In the Republican race, Robert Garza is currently heading up this race ahead of John McLean. The winner will represent District 74 in the Texas House of Representatives. District 74 covers a small section of El Paso that extends all the way to Piedras Negras. This is going to be in far east El Paso, Montana Vista area. The Republican winner is going to run against the incumbent Democrat, Eddie Morales Jr.
ABC 7's complete coverage of Super Tuesday is far from over with.
We're going to have the results of the presidential primary as well as other races happening in other states. This is Super Tuesday, after all, and the congressional races here in El Paso coming up after the break. This is ABC 7,
where news comes first.
It's your voice, your vote. Welcome back to ABC 7. I'm Stephanie Valle.
And I'm Paul Seacollett. Let's get straight to the results for the presidential primary in Texas. President Joe Biden easily won the Texas Democrat primary.
And former President Donald Trump also easily defeated the only Republican opponent left in the race, Nikki Haley. Trump received 78% of the vote to Nikki Haley's 17% of the vote. This is with 63% of the precincts reporting. This means that Trump and Biden are all but certain going to face off in the November 5th general election. So let's get some extra depth and perspective on these results. We're joined by Dr. Richard Pineda live. He is the director of UTEP's Sam Donaldson Center for Communication Studies. So Dr. Pineda, this probably wasn't a surprise to many people that both President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump were going to come out on top in Texas. So what do you think this actually means for Nikki Haley, especially after 14 other states are voting today?
Yeah, I think the last set of results had her winning Vermont and a very small number of delegates. I'm not entirely sure that there's much of a road left for Nikki Haley. I think the question is the donors that have given and that have sort of been holding out the possibility of some legal change that faces the former president, I think are going to reconsider. I also think that the former president is going to start to make the argument that he is in fact the nominee, and I think to a certain extent is going to kind of shun the conversation with Haley. I think he can afford to do that at this point. I think the focus is now going to be to start to lay up exactly what they want to do for the general election. Big question, of course, will be if Haley is even in the pool as a possible vice presidential running mate. I don't think that she is, but I wonder if that's not part of the equation, or at least to figure out if there's some way to maneuver once we get to the convention. But that's a long way. That's a very expensive road, and my guess is that's the conversation tonight for Haley's team. Is this worth it, and is there going to be money that will allow her to keep going? My guess is that we're going to see that campaign end relatively soon.
Hey, and the seat for Congressional District 16, which covers El Paso, is also up for grabs in the November general election. Let's go ahead and take a look at the results of the Democrat primary. Incumbent Veronica Escobar has declared victory in the vote, leading far ahead of Leland White. She is at 86% of the vote with 94% of the precincts reporting, and Leland White has 14%. So that is no surprise there. Escobar's victory tonight means she will run against Republican Irene Armendariz Jackson, and whoever wins in November will represent El Paso in the House of Representatives.
And in the congressional race for District 23, which covers a section of far east El Paso and stretches all the way to San Antonio, Tony Gonzalez, the incumbent, is far ahead of the competition, but with the closest candidate currently at 23%. That's Brandon Herrera, and Julie Clark is in third. Frank Lopez Jr. In fourth. Now you can see that Tony Gonzalez does not have that necessary 50% plus one vote. So now we want to bring in Dr. Pineda once again.
And that's surprising to many people who thought he'd win by over 50%. Dr. Pineda, let's go back to the congressional race for District 23. Congressman Tony Gonzalez is the incumbent. However, he's taken a beating from his own party, from some who say he isn't conservative enough. This after his votes to protect same-sex marriage and in support of the new gun safety laws after the 2022 Uvalde school shooting, which is actually in his district as well. Are these the major factors that you're seeing that are making this a closer race than some may have expected, and one that could turn into a runoff and most likely will now instead of an all-out victory, or was this predicted?
Well, no, I think that from the very beginning, the expectation was that the congressman would have a pretty easy run to re-election. I do think what you're seeing is part of a national trend in the Republican Party to really tighten the screws as to what it is to be Republican. And so I think some of this sort of insurgent push inside the party is very much against these people, against Republicans that might be shifting on some of these issues. The reason that that's, I think, unique to look at, and at least for the portion of El Paso County that it's represented by Gonzalez, is you've got a fairly conservative, very strong Republican. And so the fact that there are two issues that have led to him pulling out these challengers is really surprising. My guess is that he will cruise to victory in the runoff based just on his initial showing in this race. But the fact that he's going to have to now budget for a runoff and put the resources and time into campaigning, I mean, you can see that this is making some of the races. I think you saw this with this race in Texas, but certainly around the country, you're seeing some of these same shift. And I think this is the way that the party is reacting really to how former President Trump is influencing quite a few of these races.
No doubt. And here are the results for the Democrat primary for District 23. Santos Limon, he is currently leading ahead of Lee Bossinger. The numbers are currently at Limon with 59% of the vote and Bossinger with 41%. Of course, the precincts reporting are only at 35%. So this is far from over with, but Limon with the big lead.
And Texas also had a chance to pick a senator tonight. These are the Republican candidates. Ted Cruz, the incumbent, dominating the vote to keep his seat with well over 80% there. And you can see R.E. Rufus Lopez and Holland Red Gibson both well under 10%. We also have the Democratic candidates for Senate. Colin Allred is leading with 59% of the vote, and that is far ahead of what is needed to avoid that runoff with Roland Gutierrez, who is the state senator for the area that represents Uvalde. So, Dr. Pineda, Pineda, this was all the talk, is whether either of these two candidates could avoid a runoff. It appears that Colin Allred has done that tonight. So let's talk about his chances against the longtime incumbent Ted Cruz.
You know, I don't think that they're particularly good. I mean, I think that Cruz is a machine. I think in the Senate, I think, what we learned from the last Senate challenge when local Congressman Beto O'Rourke tried to challenge Cruz is that even with a really strong get out the vote and really strong efforts to engage youth voters, he still fell short. I mean, I think this is one of the things that as we look to see how the national race, the presidential race, shapes up on some of these state-bound races, I think you're going to see a very close linkage between Ted Cruz and with former President Trump. I think that comes with a tremendous amount of power. I think Allred will do well in some of the areas where Democrats have done well statewide, but I don't necessarily think that there is a path to overcome the sort of superiority. And I think that's just a function of how many Republican voters are coming out and how many have come out versus how many Democrats have come out and how many more might be able to come out. I think the Republicans are going to be far ahead in this Senate race once it gets to the general.
Thank you, Dr. Pineda. ABC 7's complete coverage of Super Tuesday continues after the break.
We're going to have a recap of the results next. And welcome back to our special coverage of Super Tuesday tonight. It is your voice, your vote, and we want to take a look back at some of our coverage from earlier tonight, covering the big races here in El Paso. We also want to bring in our guest in studio, Dr. Richard Pineda with UTEP, Sam Donaldson, Communications Department there. So first of all, just want to take I guess if we can just recap what happened tonight. Dr. Pineda, are any of the results that you saw tonight, or were they surprising in any way?
No, I mean, we're going to see a pretty healthy number of runoff elections, and that's just a function of numbers in the county, Stephanie. Once you have 3 candidates or more, it's really challenging to get that 50+1 that's needed. So it's not surprising there. I mean, I think what's going to be interesting is how these runoffs shape up. They're going to cost money, so you're going to see fundraising efforts really take off again starting tomorrow. They're going to take a lot of getting out the vote, so you're going to see these candidates really working as much of that as they possibly can. And you're also going to see a call, I think, for more forums and more engagements. And I think that's always really important. But I think one of the things that you'll also see is the difference between whether or not candidates are willing to do that or take that extra time to spend it block walking. I think there's this sort of sense of you want to be part of these public forums, but the truth of the matter is that these elections, especially at the runoff, are not going to be won in big public settings. They're going to be won knocking door to door and making sure that these voters are engaged, that you get voters to come back out again, and that you get voters to potentially give you money to pay for what this next run is going to cost.
I also want to bring up that voter turnout for this election it's abysmal. Early voting was at 5.8%. I'm looking at the voter turnout, 7.6%. And now we're talking about a runoff to get many of these major candidates onto ballot. Any words or any thoughts on that?
You know, these runoff elections, I'm going to guess, are going to be decided by very narrow vote margins. And remember, the other thing that will happen once we start to get to this is that there will be, for example, countywide runoffs. So for the sheriff's race, everybody in the county is eligible to vote. But for some of these district races and some of these other seats, you're still bound by geography. And so sometimes people get a little bit confused. I think that's why candidates have to kind of make this decision about how they want to engage voters. But here's the bottom line, Stephanie. Our voting numbers in the county county are abysmal, and they're especially abysmal with young voters. And I think, while there is a lot of conversations, especially in my classes with my students, about some of the issues at the national and international stage, some concerns about things locally, those concerns don't match voting rates. And this is a huge issue. And I think as a county, this is really one of the conversations we have to have. Like, look at what happens in an election like this that is going to go into runoffs. Look at how many people show up and figure out where that challenge is, because my guess is going to be we're going to see numbers with those younger voters that are not going to be very strong. And so for some reason, whatever interest or excitement that these young voters have in some of these issues, that's not translating to them registering to vote, and it's not translating to them actually voting.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Pineda.
Well, thanks for joining us on air online at KVIA.com and the KVIA News app for the special edition of ABC 7 News on the El Paso Las Cruces CW.
We'll see you at 10.